Hi everyone. Well, here's another video from that little guy in the corner. And this is video 5. And I was wondering between two things what to talk about. Nuances or vibrato? Nuances or talk about vibrato? So we can start from there. Is vibrato a nuance? Is vibrato a nuance? Can you have nuances without vibrato? Of course. In what I just played, I used 4 different types of vibrato. Could you tell? And even if you could you feel that that particular vibrato at that time was an enhancement, a shade, an emphasis, an accentuation, a nuance to the line? So this opens up a very interesting subject. So when you're playing your Bordoni lyrical studies, do you play it with the same vibrato all the time? So I'm going to play something, and I'll play it with vibrato of one kind, and then I'm going to play it without vibrato. Okay? Time to move the mic. That was with. Just in case you couldn't tell, but I'm pretty sure you could. And now I'm going to do it without. That was really interesting because I got caught between two worlds. That's called the Russian lullaby, something my grandmother used to sing to me when I was quite young, very young. And she had a beautiful voice. And she sung with this vibrato, and that was probably my earliest introduction to vibrato. Was through her and her singing. She was not a trained singer. It was natural. It was free. It was heartfelt. And so, the without vibrato wasn't without nuance. But one thing I realized is how ingrained to play that with a certain kind of feeling, thinking of her. I can't play that without thinking of her. And so, isn't it interesting how things get in us? And sometimes how difficult it is to shut it off. I would have had an easier time playing a Bordoni with no vibrato, frankly. In fact, I did that in someone's lesson the other day. We had this real big vibrato talk. My teacher, Ronald Ricketts, when I was, I don't know, maybe I was 12. He was a great trombonist, second trombonist in the Minnesota Orchestra. For many years, up until, I would say, early 90s. And he had a beautiful vibrato, and I was playing for him, and he said, "Wow, you're using a diaphragm vibrato." He said, "On trombone, we usually do jaw vibrato." And so, when I was 12, I learned jaw vibrato. But I go back and forth. In that first thing that I played for you, like I said, I used 4 different kinds. There was jaw vibrato. There was diaphragm vibrato. There was slide vibrato. And there was something called U vibrato, which is with the tongue. And it's a vibrato, but it's kind of like, it's a very kind of scary movie vibrato, if you want. And I love that vibrato for certain things. Sometimes I'll use, believe it or not, a head vibrato. And I know I have a student who does this very naturally. And I've seen some of my favorite trumpet players have used it. Ralph Smedvig, Armando Catala, Tim Morrison. It kind of looks, I'm sure you've seen many players do it before. They had a lot more control over it than I do. So vibrato, 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 to vibrate. I remember asking Stephen Zellmer about it, because after I studied with Ron Ricketts for a while, I then went to Stephen Zellmer and asked him about vibrato. And he said, look, I can't remember the name of the singer that he was telling me about, who said vibrato either happens as a natural feeling that comes when a person feels a particular piece of music in a certain way and they can't not help but start vibrating. Because it makes you think, when did it just first start really happening? Not what the history books say, what the timeline is, but when did it start happening? It's a very emotional thing, so one would think more romantic. But I think there was a romantic era before we decided there was a romantic era. Or the feeling of some kind of fervor, longing, cry, or ecstatic joy that would create the vibrato. So I would say experiment with your vibrato. You know, a lot of times classical trombonists don't want to play with slide vibrato unless it's like a Dorsey tune or big band or some kind of jazzy, bluesy type thing. They don't really want to do it. But there have been many fine trombonists, you know, in symphony orchestras that really used to have extremely fine slide vibratos. It's all a matter of how you get to know it. Because every vibrato has a spectrum of possibilities, even at looking at it from the level of slower or faster. Sometimes my jaw vibrato can be slow, and I remember Milton Stevens. I took some lessons from him in the summer of 1972 when I was in the Boston University Tanglewood Institute program. And he was the trombone teacher. And he said, I remember at that time, I was working on the Creston, and he said, look, he said, your vibrato seems slow. It should be at least 5 vibrations per second. And he was very meticulous, Milt. That was a little difficult for me to calculate in terms of the musical feelings going on. So I would suggest for someone to play with the vibrato. If something naturally happens with the vibrato, that's great. But play with it. Play with it and see what happens. It's a nuance. But as we all know, there's not just one kind of nuance, is there? So why should there be one kind of vibrato?